So tonight I'm asking, should life mean life, with all murderers never to be released from prison? Let me know your thoughts by emailing dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. While you're there, vote, and I'll poll those results shortly. To help you make up your mind, though, I'm joined now by ex-prisoner and philanthropist Mark Johnson, former policeman and ex-UKIP leader Henry Bolton, and human rights activist Aisha Ali Khan. Henry Bolton, I am just so black and white about this. You murder someone, you go down for life. Life must mean life. I mean whole life sentences for any murderer. And I feel we need that deterrent now.
I agree. I mean, Dan, you know, the public probably generally don't know that there are two different types of sentence. A whole of life sentence, which means that you never come out, or a life sentence, which means that you actually get a tariff. It might be 12 years, 7 years, whatever it might be, after which you might be released. And then if you're released on licence, so to speak. But it is no real deterrent. Life, if you're saying life, it should be life. If you're going to sentence somebody for 12 years, it should be 12 years. And indeed, there are many crimes that have taken place recently, high-profile crimes in the last year, 2 years, that indeed the public are crying out for a more effective sentencing approach. There is a lawlessness that you covered partly earlier on. Britain could be said to be broken. Indeed, I think you're right. And I'm working on something called BritPack to try and address some of that. But the fact of the matter is that the public sees things going downhill rapidly in the rule of law and policing area. And if you don't have a robust sentencing policy, and that's seen to be robust, and is not being, at the moment, it's not being seen to be effective either. But if it's not being seen to be robust, not being seen to be effective, then the public are going to demand more. And I demand more. I think, you know, you've got to...
and we must demand
profile cases, but quite frankly, we don't need to. Everybody knows what they are. People are being released from prison having absolutely destroyed entire families, as well as ending lives. It's not good enough that they're let out early. No matter, and Dan, if I can just cover this point, people are let out after good behaviour or after a tariff, minimum service, if they're sentenced to life imprisonment, if the probation service believe that there is, or have reason to think that that person won't constitute a threat to the public. Well, what about the deterrence effect of letting somebody out early? There is no deterrent effect to let somebody out if you let somebody out early.
Of course. No, I completely agree. Mark Johnson, you disagree, though, and obviously you've gone through the justice system as a prisoner yourself. So why is Henry wrong?
Well, I think where all the focus is, obviously it's an emotive issue, and obviously, you know, in the media today and stuff. And all of the focus, and the easiest way to look at this is saying tougher sentences, etc. And all of the focus is on this end of it. So policing, tougher sentences, etc. When it actually, what I would say is the real answer of addressing the causes behind these issues. You heard from your guest earlier about youth clubs closing. We're looking at, sort of social breakdown, social services literally disappearing. We're looking at drug services disappearing. I think, where I would agree, say the public don't have any confidence in the prison and probation service. I agree with that. And okay, that's where I would focus.
Mark, sorry to interrupt, but obviously long term, yes, we need to be a stronger society. But come on, look at what we're facing right now. Look at what's happening on the streets of lawless Britain. Genuinely, do you think it is acceptable for the people who are literally stabbing folk to death and shooting folk fatally on the streets of Britain right now to ever be released?
Well, I mean, the truth is there's less than 50 people. Sorry, that's my dogs in the background. There's only 50
He's
people.
agreeing with me.
Oh, yeah,
I can tell. Yeah. I can tell he's with me. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's only 50 people, under 50 people, serving whole life sentences in this country.
Yep. Well,
the question is to the public is what is happening in prison today to actually stop those people being reconvicted on release?
Okay.
And I think that's where the confidence would come in the justice system.
Okay, well, I'll let you go and sort the dog, because I'm going to bring in the human rights activist Aisha Ali Khan now. Aisha, who are you with on this, Henry or Mark?
Well, Dan, believe it or not, I was sentenced to prison as well, and I spent a few weeks in prison for a civil offence, I'd like to add. And I saw firsthand how difficult it was, and obviously it was a female-only prison, it was in London, and it made me realise, I mean, I am a teacher by profession, by the way, and most recently I was working in a school which many of you will consider a PRU, a pupil referral unit, where pupils as young as 4 or 5 years old who cannot be taught in mainstream schools are sent to these types of units. So they are specialist schools that deal with behavioural issues, emotional and mental health issues as well. And these children often come from very broken homes, and they are damaged. And these children will become tomorrow's damaged teenagers, and therefore tomorrow's damaged adults as well. And they will enter, and some of my students, by the way, had already entered a life of crime by the age of 11, 12, 13. They've been arrested, they've been in youth centres and so on, and some of them have even got juvenile sentences as well and records. But my point is, to pick up a little bit of what Mark has said, we need a different approach. I agree with what Henry has said, that the sentencing is actually laughable. Some of the crimes that have been committed, stalking, sexual assaults, rape, child abuse, etc., and they're given pitiful sentences.
But what about murderers, Aisha? Because that's what I'm talking about. I am talking about these murderers, and whether life should mean life. If you go out and you brutally stab someone, you fatally shoot someone, why should you ever be released? We don't want that. The public doesn't want that.
Absolutely. And I accept that if you take somebody's life, and often in a very brutal manner, why should you have the luxury of living and enjoying your life and being released early to resume the
Mark,
life
why should you have that luxury, Mark? You've killed someone. It's very simple to me.
But can I just say, Dan, can I just add something?
Yeah.
If you look at the statistics of the year leading up to before the pandemic, in London, just London alone, a lot of the stabbings, a lot of the knife crime was carried out by young people, teenagers and people in their 20s. And majority of the victims are also young people as well. And very few were obviously older. But we have to start at some point where we have created a society, and I live near Bradford. I visit Bradford quite a lot, and I have seen, and this is just anecdotal evidence here, I have seen people drug dealing just totally on the streets.
I see it on my street every night. Exactly. And so the thing is, there are lots of ways that this needs to be solved. I appreciate that. But one of the ways, Mark, is by these young people being terrified enough that if they stab someone and the person dies, they will lose their entire life. They're not going to be out in 5 or 10 years.
So all of the work that I've done over my career is it basically asking young people, especially knife crime perpetrators, would the length of sentence you've now got deterred you at the time that you committed that offence? The answer is no. And ask the reason why is because my life was in chaos. I was out of control, and I never thought about
I want Henry to respond to you directly on that. Henry, how do you respond to that?
The average cost of somebody's sentence for the year is £38,000 per prisoner. Overall, MOJ stats is 48. Right?
Okay. I just want Henry to respond to that first point that you made, though, Mark, because it's important. So, Henry...
There's another cost, and that's the cost of life. But as far as I'm concerned, what we're doing at the moment, and albeit that I totally agree there have been cuts in welfare services and so on, it is not working. We are seeing increased knife crime. We are seeing mayhem and blood on our streets still. We are seeing no deterrence of real import being conveyed to the youngsters. I agree that perhaps at the moment when you ask them, they would say that the sentence would not have been a deterrent to them, the sentence that they've got now. However, if there was a general atmosphere and knowledge, if you like, instinctive knowledge, that if you were caught having killed somebody, you would effectively lose your life, because it would be you'd lose all your freedom, your liberty for the rest of your days, then I don't believe that it would not have a deterrent factor on anyone.
Well, indeed. And we saw, didn't we, with Rudy Giuliani in New York with his two strikes and you're out policy.
I think that was a good policy.
Sentences
and he was
provide
facing many of the same problems that we're facing on our streets now.
Indeed.
And at the moment, with our weak policing, and our, which is spending more time, it seems, as far as the criminals and gangs are concerned, trying to impress communities that, frankly, are law-abiding anyway, rather than going out and deterring crime and violent crime, then, put the two things together and we've got a perfect storm. And it's going to get worse until we get some real leadership.